All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I had messages from 4 different people this morning explaining that they've got colds or whatever and weren't going to be able to come. So I knew we were going to be down. I hope there's still a couple more people coming, though, because not everybody contacted me that isn't here yet. All right, look at the left-hand column, the I love you list. And what I want you to think about is, how do you like to be loved? That's one question. A second question is, what kind of love do people usually give in this world? So there's 2 questions. How do you like to be loved, and what kind of love do most people give out in this world? All right, so what kind of love are you looking for from people? Yeah, I love you even though, right? Even though my wife has, not that I'm admitting this publicly, but it might have reason to get sick of me sometimes. Cindy, you have reason too. I'm stating that publicly.
She's an I love you, but.
Yeah. Well, yeah, now I'm going to go over that, but I think it's I love you in spite of. I love you even though. Yeah. So I love you period is pretty good, right? Because it's, all right, yay. We were hoping you were coming. We're just getting started. Look at the list on the top left-hand corner, where it's I love you list, and we're answering 2 questions. What kind of love do you like to receive, and what kind of love do most people give out in this world? So we've said I love you even though, or I love you in spite of, or I love you regardless. That's kind of that's almost the best love we can get in this world, because there's going to be times we fall a little short, we hurt someone's feelings, we irritate people. And we need them desperately to love us even though. Yeah. So I love you, period. That's a good type of love, you know, because that's no matter what you do. And if you think of the marriage vows, in sickness and health, for better, for worse, for richer, for thank you for getting me started in the right place. For better, for worse, for richer, poor, in sickness and health until death do us part. You know, that's no matter what. That's the type of love we want. But what type of love do we usually get? And I'm going to tell you those 3 in between. I think that's what most people give. I love you when. And that may not sound bad, but it's really a form of selfishness. I love you when you do these things for me, and if you don't do them, well, guess what? I don't really love you.
I love you as much.
Yeah, and you know, it's really a form of manipulation. So I love you when. I love you because, and that may not sound as threatening, but it really is. I love you because you're young and beautiful. Now that's what Denise said to me. And not so young.
She lies.
Well, I might have lied actually, so I don't want you to think poorly of her. But, you know, what happens? You know, 37 years later, you're not quite as young and maybe not quite as beautiful. Those abs of steel that I never had are flabs of whatever, and, you know, but I still want, hey, you made it. Grab one of those handouts, you need it. Good news.
Look, I told my wife this morning that somebody told me she had a good-looking husband. She said, who was that? Is it me?
Yeah, that would be about one of the few. Anyway, but I love you because that still has strings attached to it. And most of the time, when you're not so young and not so beautiful, then I'm moving on and I got to get me a new trophy wife or whatever. You know how the rich people can do it. I love you, but. Now, whenever I've heard that one scares me. Because what comes after the but, usually? Yeah, I love you, but I'm leaving you. I love you, but, and by the way, that's not love. If you love someone, you don't leave them. I love you, but means you're saying that, but what follows is going to be a disaster. And I've had too many people come and sit down with me and say, you know, I love my wife, but I'm going to leave her. And then I press them, I find out why. Why is it they're leaving her for son?
They doesn't love her.
Well, sometimes they say that. I've fallen out of love with her. That's an excuse, by the way. My wife falls out of love with me on a daily basis and then, you know, falls right back in love, you know.
You give her reason.
I'm not officially admitting that because this is on tape. But yes, I will kind of hint at it, yes. But you know what? She chooses to love. You know why when someone says, I love you, but I'm leaving you, almost always there's someone else that they've already started hanging around with. So that's, I love you, but scares me. So the type of I love you, period, where I love you, we're looking at the left-hand column, the I love you list, and but I love you, period. I love you even though you give me plenty of reasons not to. Those are good I love you statements. The other ones are not. But most of the time we say I love you for what reason? To get something we want. I mean, that's true. You know, what is the song? It's from long ago, obviously, because I only know songs from long ago. The Cheap Hotel Rendezvous or something. You remember that song? I'll even tell you that I love you if you want me to. What is the name?
Third-rate romance.
Third-rate romance. Thank you. I couldn't come up with that key line. But I'll even tell you I love you if you want me to. Okay, one, that's pathetic. And that's not love. But why is he saying it? Because he wants to get her in the hotel room. You know, that's not love. But we cheapen love. We cheapen the word love. By the way, the most common way we use the word love, oh, I love your dessert. I love that pizza. You know, I love coming here. I love whatever. We love things, and, you know, that cheapens the word love. Because real love means I am willing to sacrifice of myself, even my life, for you. Real love is always sacrificial. It means I would do anything for you. Now, we're not perfect at that, but that's what real love aspires to be. And you know what? If a shooter came in here trying to kill me, I bet you Chuck would stand up and try to take him out. Well, if it was his wife, he would for sure.
Think on this.
Yeah, I knew he was going to say that. Somehow I knew he was going to say that. Well, think about it hard, because
I would do that.
yes, I know you would. He is my friend. Otherwise, I wouldn't pick on him so hard. But, you know, that's what love is. Love means I'll put myself at risk. If it costs me something, I don't care, if that's what you need to do. And you want an example of that. So my grandson Leo is here now. By the way, we found out recently that my great-grandfather was a Leo. Now, he was just Leo. Leo's full name is Leopold. And my grandfather's name, I just knew Andrew Bartholomew, but his official name was Andrew Leo Bartholomew. So we didn't even know it was a family name, but that's pretty cool. But, you know, if you think of how often my daughter and her husband are getting up to feed Leo, which is like 4 times a night still, giving up sleep, tired all day long, all that kind of stuff, and yet they keep doing it. That's sacrificial love. But that's what love is. Jim Johnson's mom showed sacrificial love for his dad. When he had a fast progressing type of Alzheimer's, I guess it was. But I mean, it was astounding to me how quickly he went from functioning just fine to wandering out in the middle of the night and ending up having to go to you know, a nursing home. But every single day she went and fed him breakfast, fed him lunch, and then would go home sometimes to help with her sister, you know, and stuff. But every single day. And it, you know what? Especially near the end, he didn't even know who she was some of the time. I think I'm right on this. But she still went.
Always.
Yeah, and that's what the marriage vows are, but that's sacrificial love. That's real love. I'm not doing it for what I get from you. I'm doing it just because. That's the type of love we need. That's the type of love we need to give too, though. So, by the way, that's the type of love that God gives us. When he says he loves us, it's not just feelings. Oh, I love you, you know. And I like those feelings, don't get me wrong. They're fun. But that's, you know, that's not just feelings. It's commitment, and it's a willingness to put us first no matter what. So look at Matthew 18. Yeah, let's just do Bible study for a bit. Matthew 18, which in the large print Bibles, and if you need more large print Bibles, if there's not one near you, there's a whole bunch of them back on that piano back there right behind Jim Johnson. But Matthew 18 is on 15:16. Ooh, 15:16. That's almost rhyming. Matthew 18, looks like starting at verse 23. Now, actually, we're going to start at verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times. Now, in Jewish rabbis taught at that time that you had to forgive someone 3 times if they asked for forgiveness. But after 3 times, you didn't have to forgive them. Let's see. Now, you guys haven't irritated. You've only been married a short time, so you haven't irritated each other too much yet. Never. Yeah, you're stretching it now, John.
It's coming.
Yeah. But you know what? 3 times is not enough. Cindy, I'm just going to ask you, you don't respond. Has Chuck irritated you more than 3 times? How many years have you been married?
Today?
Yeah. Well, I already know that answer. Yeah. How many years have you been? 35, yeah. Because I knew it was somewhere close to ours. Yeah, maybe a few times.
I get up in the mornings and I tell my wife how much I love her and how beautiful she is every morning.
And then the day goes downhill from there. Yeah, but that is beautiful, by the way. Thank you for doing that.
And that's encouraging me to work.
Get up. You have to support me in the manner I'm used to being accustomed.
But I've made that I go out of my way to tell her that every morning, and I have for years.
Yeah, if I can't say that to Denise because when I leave the house, she still has 2 hours of sleep at least, and she does not want to hear anything from me. But you know what? I promised her that every morning I was going to sing to her, "Morning, beautiful, it's morning, and you're beautiful." But you know, after you get pillows thrown at you a number of times, yeah. Don't do that now. Yeah, but yeah, you know, but in any relationship, you hurt each other sometimes. You hurt each other's feelings, unintentional. But for my wife, I don't hit her. I don't call her names. I don't raise my voice even. But sometimes I have a tone that hurts her. And sometimes she feels like she doesn't come first. And she's probably right. You know, because sometimes I let the kids go first, be first, or you guys, the church. So I've irritated her more than 3 times. Even more than, Peter thought he was doing pretty good when he said, do we have to forgive each other 7 times? You know, well, that sounds pretty generous. That's, you know, woo, that's really, you know, he's expecting to be praised for that, up to 7 times. And then Jesus answered, I tell you not 7 times, but 77 times. And by the way, that is a horrible translation. So in the footnote, you'll see the better translation. So this was written in Greek, and the Greek language, Koine Greek, doesn't exist anymore. So when we translate it, what does it say in the footnote? 70 times 7. And that is the point. And there was one kid who was keeping track of how many times his brother treated him wrong. And he had a list, and he was just waiting to get to 491. Because then he was going to get him, you know. Well, that's missing the point. 70 times 7. 7 is this number of completeness in the biblical system. 7 times 7 times 10 is unending. You know, that's what it really stands for. But if you think of it, that's how God forgives us. It's an unending forgiveness. And thank God he doesn't keep track of 489, whoa, you're getting close, 490, one more, and you're, whoomp. You know, that's not how God does it. So then Jesus tells this story, and the story really is what they wanted us to focus on. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Now, that is a correct translation, but we don't know what that means. So look in your footnote again. See, I'm training you to read footnotes. How much is 10,000 talents? Yeah, that is millions of dollars. See, so I calculated in like 1987 or 8 when I was a brand new pastor. I was doing this in Bible study. I wanted to know how much 10,000 talents would be in money then. And I came up with a number of about $20 million. So that's in 1988, let's say. What would that be valued now? That
11 Bitcoin.
yeah, which is nothing, some of them, but you know, that's, let's just say $40 million. It's at least doubled. You know, so $40 million. So Hal, you get paid pretty good because you're a hard-working guy, very bright. You get paid a lot. So could you pay the interest on a loan that was made to you for $40 million?
Need a lot of help.
Yeah, so let's say I'm using round numbers. So 10% interest, $4 million a year. How many of you could pay $4 million a year on your interest? And if you can't pay that, that means your debt is increasing each year. You will never, by the way, credit cards are almost that bad. You know, it will take you 47 years if you just make minimum payments or whatever. So what I want you to see is this is a huge debt. Now, how, you know, what this guy needed all that money for, how he got into that much debt, I don't know. But other than the king, no one in that society could pay that debt. Absolutely no one. So a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all he had be sold to repay the debt. Now that sounds cruel, but there was no bankruptcy court back then. So there are two ways, if you owed money and couldn't pay, one of two things would happen. One, you'd be thrown into debtor's prison. We had that concept even in the United States for a while. And that concept, now you can't earn money while you're in prison, but the concept was your friends and relatives, hopefully they like you, and then they will come raise the money to pay your debt and you'll get out. Yeah, I wasn't going to say it, Chuck, but I was thinking it. I'm just telling you. Too bad, you know. Now, the other way is that you and your spouse and your children would all be sold into slavery. Now, it's not lifetime slavery. It's 7 years of labor. For 7 years, you'll work without getting paid. The only thing you'll get is a place to sleep and food to eat. So for 7 years. And after 7 years, probably with this debt, that won't even come close to paying it off. But you know, after that, the debt is canceled. So the king was doing what actually the kindest thing he could do. Rather than throw the man into debtor's prison where he'd rot for the rest of his life, he was going to have 7 years of service. The servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I'll pay back everything. Yeah. There's a lot of promises that are made that aren't going to be kept. God, if you help me this one time, I'll never do that stuff again. You think God's ever heard that? Yeah. And we kind of halfway mean it, but, you know, when he said this, it couldn't happen. But the servant's master, and I want to put the word but in there because this is the surprising part. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, the entire debt, all $40 million is marked paid, and let him go. Now, I'm not looking at the rest of the parable, you know it, but he wasn't so good at sharing forgiveness with other people, but he sure was excited to have that debt canceled. So, by the way, what's that parable about? Us and God, isn't it? Because what's the debt we owed God? The debt of our sin. And I'm going to tell you what, let's suppose from this point forward, each one of us lived perfect. So for today and every day thereafter, we lived absolutely perfect. Never sinned, loved God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and loved our neighbor as ourselves every single day. Would that make up for the sins that we've committed already at this point in our lives? No, it doesn't. So there's no way we can undo or make up for or pay. The wages of sin is death. So the only way I pay my debt is death. I got no means. I can't pay that debt. And it is a mountain full of debt. So one guy, I think he was Episcopalian, but I like this. He tried to calculate how many sins he had committed in his lifetime. Now, you know, some sins are easier to figure out, like how many times did you cuss at somebody? Okay, we'll put that down. Or if you got in a fist fight, you can remember that. But the real tricky part is how many times do I put myself first above God every single day? And that's the astronomical part. But he came up with, I don't remember the exact number, but I'm going to tell you, he figured at that point in his life he had committed over 1 billion sins. That's a mountain of debt. And we got no way of paying it. But because of Jesus, God cancels the debt. Yeah, this is a total unrealistic story. I love it because God's love for us is an unrealistic thing. It's surprising. It's unexpected. Whew. Cancels the debt, and we're free. So we talk about amazing grace. So what is grace? What's that word mean? So, who remembers the acronym that somebody came up with? That certainly wasn't me. God's riches at Christ's expenses. You know, grace. So what's mercy? All right, let's start with that. What's mercy? If I had mercy on you. So let's see. Who likes to drive extremely fast here? You can admit it. There's no police officers currently in this room. All right, who likes to drive kind of fast? Above the speed limit fast? Nobody's admitting. You were the last person I would have thought of. Yeah. I'm just picking on you. See, I must like you because now I'm starting to pick on you too. Jacob, yeah, I always pick on him. I was going to pick Jacob actually, but since you volunteered. So let's suppose Riley was going, what would be the most you'd go over the speed limit? Like interstate.
Like 10, 15?
All right, we're going to say 20. So she's going 20 miles over the speed limit. By the way, what do police officers tell me? What's the code, unwritten code, for when you get pulled over? Well, here's what one one sheriff's deputy told me. 8, you're fine. 9, you're mine. That's how he goes. 9 miles an hour over the speed limit, you're mine. So you get pulled over by one of our finest in North Carolina state troopers, and he says, "Do you know how fast you're going?" "Well, I think it was just a couple miles over the speed limit." And by the way, look really innocent, you know. And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to be nice to you, and I'm not going to give you a ticket. But I don't ever want to see you driving like that again. It's too risky. You could hurt yourself or someone else." Now that's mercy, right? She didn't get the ticket. She was going 20 miles over the speed limit. What is it you have to get reckless driving? Is that 25 over the speed limit? Yeah. It scares me that you know that, Jacob.
Well, it's because I got pulled over going 27 and he cut me a break. So I didn't
Oh, that's what I thought. Somebody, because my son got reckless driving one time, and that ticket's not so much fun. Whoo, yeah. So, yeah, but he actually showed you mercy, too, because he knocked it down a little bit. Just giving you a verbal warning would have been even better. But so that's mercy. Mercy is when you don't give someone the punishment they deserve. But grace, so let's suppose, well, it'd have to be a female officer in this. So female state trooper pulls you over and says, okay, you were going 20 miles over the speed limit. I could bust you, but tell you what, follow me. And she takes you up to the nearest Texas Roadhouse, and she says, "Come on in with me," and you don't know what's going on. She said, "Sit down," and then she buys you a dinner. And you have a lunch with her. You know, you deserve a ticket, but you get a free lunch. Wow. That's what grace is. Undeserved kindness. Something, why would someone do that? That's what God does. You know, undeserved. What do we deserve from him? I hate to say this. Hell. Damnation. Punishment. Whatever, wrath, whatever word you want to use. But what does he give us? He gives us love. He gives us grace. He gives us his son. So real love is always a matter of actions, not just feelings and words. So God proves his love for us in this. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. God so loved the world, John 3:16, that he gave his one and only son. And with the word "gave" there doesn't hint at everything, but you know what it means. He gave his son into this world, yes, but that's not the real giving part. He gave his son to the cross. He gave his son to die for us. That's love. That whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. That's amazing grace. And that's my definition of love. Love will sacrifice anything for the sake of the one that is loved. And my hope is that for my family, I would gladly do that. Since I'm a poor, sinful human being, I'm not sure. But that's what I want to give my family. And that's what I want to give back to God, because I know what kind of love He's given me. All right, so here's going to be the exception. I told you I don't like to read to you. I'm going to read 2 pages to you. And it's the part kind of in dark box. The copy, I did my best. It didn't come through perfect. I think you can read it. So this is a summary of the life of Christ. Okay, God showed His love for us by giving us Jesus. So who is Jesus? By the way, this time of year, it's good. This is a good Bible study for us. But now, the part that's uncomfortable to me, these are men's words about Jesus. I would much rather have you read God's words about Jesus, which is called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So what you see over in the one column is where these statements are from. And I would love it if this week or next week you would take the time to look those passages up and make sure. Because when I read you a summary about Jesus, it's not the same as Scripture. Now, I don't have time to go through 4 books of the Bible. How long, let's see, some of you have come to my other Bible study classes. How many verses do I usually cover in a class session? Jim, you have a sense. How many?
Not many.
Yeah, so my record is a half. I covered a half a verse. Probably when I'm doing it on purpose fast, if I cover a half a chapter, that's like a miracle for me. But we've taken months on a book of the Bible, literally. Pastor Leguten actually on Job and Isaiah, I don't know, did they ever finish? I mean, Genesis, they might never finish.
Verse 20,
Yeah, chapter 20, not verse 20. I know they're past that. But so this is the only way I can realistically do a summary of Christ, but it makes me a little uncomfortable. I used to teach one of the gospel books of the gospel to an adult senior citizen center. You know what I'm talking about? It's really adult daycare. That's what I called it when my dad had to go to one. So people come there during the day. They have somebody there that gives them medicine. And then, when their families can be at home with them, then they go back home. So I would spend months going over Matthew, for example. It would take me months. So this is the summary. I'm going to make occasional comments. I can't help it. It's just part of who I am, so it will not be read perfectly. All right, you guys are always welcome to come in. What time do you need this place?
As soon as possible today.
All right, we'll go fast. Well, I'll do my best. All right, the strangest person who ever lived is one way of describing Jesus Christ. By the way, that is true. There's no one like Jesus. He's absolutely unique. So what's unique about Christmas story about Jesus? Virgin birth? Kind of unusual. Angels come and sing to shepherds. Wise men seek and find him. God and man join together in one. Just everything about him is unique. That's not stuff that normally happens. There's never been anyone like him. Throughout his life, people were faced with the question, who is this man? That's a question we still face today as we read the Bible account. That's really the key thing we ask today. Who is this Jesus? From the very beginning, there's something strange about Jesus. When his mother is pregnant with him, she says she's still a virgin. Strange thing happens when he is born in a stable. Shepherds and wise men who come to visit him call him Christ the Lord. Christ is the name assigned to the coming Messiah, the promised one, the anointed one. So that identifies him as the promised one of the Old Testament. Lord, the Jewish people didn't feel it was right for them to say God's name. And remember, God told Moses that his name was Yahweh, I am. And they felt, since they were sinners with sinful lips, they should not speak God's name. So Lord was their nickname for the one true God. So whenever you see Lord, when Thomas says, my Lord and my God, that's a strong confession, because he's identifying him as the one true God. And King of the Jews, that's what the wise men come and say. He was born King of the Jews, tying him into the Numbers 24:17, where a special star would announce a king would arise in Judah. But then nothing is heard of Jesus for 30 years until he's baptized and the time comes for him to begin his work. There's only one thing told in the Gospels about his life between birth narrative and 30 years later. What is the one account? Yeah, when he's 12 years old, and his family assumed he was traveling with a group that was going back home, and he wasn't. He was still in the temple. And what was he doing? He was teaching the rabbis. He was teaching all the religious leaders, and they were amazed at his wisdom. They were amazed at his answers. And Jesus says, "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house?" And Mary and Joseph knew who he was. You know, they knew who he was. By the way, I still blame them, not him, because before they even started leaving the city, they should have made sure they had him. You know, I'm going to tell you, when I've tried to leave the store without making sure I have all my kids in tow, it didn't work out well. You know, but yeah. So there's some books that are called the lost books of the Bible. They're not lost books of the Bible. Those are books that wanted to get in the Bible, were written way late. Obviously, we're not of Scripture, but they have, Jesus as a young man, seeing a guy cruelly tormenting a bird and breaking its neck, and then Jesus goes and touches the man's arm, and it withers and is now useless, and then he touches the bird, and the bird flies free. That did not happen. You know, the first miracle was changing water into wine. It wasn't any of that stuff, but that's what they want to say. So then when he's baptized, we hear God the Father saying, "This is my own dear Son." The Son of God, is that who he is? And that's the question people started asking at that moment. And the large crowds were there when John the Baptist baptized him. He begins to preach and teach. He talks about God as his Father. Crowds flock to him because he seems to know what he's talking about. No one ever spoke like this man, they say. The rabbis kind of hemmed and hawed. They were guessing a lot of times. So they would give, well, it could be, might be. And Jesus states it. Like he knows it, because he does. He teaches with authority, and he teaches with certainty about who God is and what God wants. No one ever spoke like this man. And his word has power, special power to control nature. When did his word control nature? Yeah, when he said to the storm, "Be still," the wind stopped, the rain stopped, the waves stopped, and it's perfectly calm. And by the way, in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, that doesn't happen ever, that it's perfectly calm, hardly. You can think of waves on the ocean. It doesn't get totally calm. So he had power to control nature and to change people's lives. When he speaks, sick people get better, blind people see. Remember that guy was born blind, and everybody tried to prove that Jesus was faking it. And you know what? The guy said, "Well, I guarantee you I was blind, and now I see, and Jesus is the one who did it." "Well, this must be a trick, or whatever. Were you faking it for 30 years? "Yeah, that's really a good scam if you have to fake it for 30 years. But when blind people see, lame people walk. And think of that, a crippled guy who had been paralyzed since birth. Well, how big were his legs? They're twigs. Greg Ramsey, some of you know what I'm talking about. Greg hadn't walked since 3rd grade, something like that, and his legs, I can't palm a basketball, but I think I could pretty well fit my hand around his leg. So if somebody would have healed Greg's disease, would he have been able to walk right then? No. It'd take months, if not years, of therapy before he could walk. But Jesus not only heals, he restores full muscle tone. I mean, that's incredible. The guy jumps up and walks. Even a few dead people became alive again. When he comes to some people and says, "Follow me," they obey just like that. There's something about him that attracts them. And as they follow and listen and watch, they notice two distinct sides to Jesus. On the one hand, they see power and authority and glimpses of sheer glory. On the other hand, the same Jesus seems so frail and totally human. Did he look like God? No. In our pictures, what do you see on the pictures of Jesus on all the stained glass windows? Halos. Whew, you see that yellow ring? He didn't have that in real life. What did he look like? It says he wasn't really an attractive guy. He was just a typical guy. Jewish guy, brown hair, olive-colored skin, big nose, facial hair. All the stuff that would have been normal. But there was nothing particularly attractive about him, that Isaiah says, that men would desire him. So they see On the one hand, he seems totally human. One minute he breaks down and cries because his good friend Lazarus has died. The next moment, he commands the dead man to come out of the grave, and it happens. He says, Lazarus, come out. And a guy who had been dead 4 days, already wrapped in all his grave cloths. They always buried people on the same day they died because they didn't embalm, and things start happening in the body quickly if you don't embalm. And so then they wrap him in spices and ointments, and they put him in the tomb the same day he dies. 4 days later, he comes. Jesus says, roll away the tombstone. And they say, don't do it, Lord. It's going to stink. Woo! You don't want to do that. He says, roll it away. And then he says, Lazarus, come out. And just like that, the dead guy, the guy whose body's been decaying for 4 days, comes out and unwraps his own grave cloths. My friend at the seminary, one of my professor really, but he's my friend too, but he said, it's a good thing Jesus specified Lazarus, because otherwise everybody in that cemetery would have risen. That's the power he has. When he comes to some people and says, follow me, they obey just like that. And that's a great miracle too. Because people barely know him, but he says, come follow me, and they drop everything. They drop their careers, their family. Now, they went back home now and then, checked on their families, don't get me wrong, but they left everything. There's something special about him that attracts them. And as they follow and listen and watch, they notice two distinct sides to him. Yeah, we just talked about that. Who is he? The crowds think he's a prophet. His disciples say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. But the religious leaders find another answer. His power is from the devil, they say. If he has any sort of connection to God, then why does he hang around with sinners and not give good people their proper recognition? Why doesn't he judge people on their merits? They wanted him to judge people, to have a checklist, because they were doing the checklist, they thought. Thank God he does not have a checklist, because I would not make it. Neither would you. And he hangs around with the wrong type of people instead of the good people, the Pharisees. Those are the really good goody two-shoe people. He hangs around with repentant tax collectors and former prostitutes and all kinds of yucky, evil, smelly sinners. He's obviously not from God if he hangs around with those type of people. And I say, thank God he hang around with awful sinners like that, because that means he can hang around with me too. Because my sin stinks just as bad. Maybe even worse, because I should know better. Jesus' ministry comes to an end after about 3 years. The crowds cheer him into Jerusalem as King of the Jews. Many imagine that he'll now drive out the Roman occupational forces. They think he's come to be an earthly king. But nothing happened. He simply continues to teach in the temple. The crowd's mood changes. Why did he do that? He went into Jerusalem to force the hand of the people against him. He came to die. He came to make it happen right then. By hanging around in the temple teaching, they knew they had to get rid of him because the crowds were gathering, go more and more and more, and the religious leaders knew they had to get him out of there. Meanwhile, Judas makes a deal with Jesus' enemies to betray him. Jesus is captured without a struggle. The leaders put him on trial before their own council. They found him guilty of blasphemy because of his claim to be the Christ, the Son of God. So that was a religious trial. Since Rome occupied Jerusalem, they could not give the death penalty, the Jewish people. So the only people who could order the death penalty was Rome. That's why there had to be a second trial. First trial, you know what, Pontius Pilate doesn't give a hoot if someone blasphemes the name of the Israeli God. Who cares? He probably did it on a regular basis. But then they had to make up charges. So what did they say? Well, he claims to be a king and he tells people not to pay their taxes. By the way, he did claim to be a king, but not of this world, which is not a threat to Pontius Pilate. And he actually told people to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That was his exact word. So this is all trumped up stuff. Pilate knew it. He needed to just let him go. But Pilate was on thin ice because he wasn't keeping control of the Jewish people the way he was supposed to. And so if he wanted to get promoted from this third-rate back, little garbage hole of Jerusalem, then he was going to have to appease the crowd. So he gave in so that his political ambitions could be furthered. But he knew Jesus was innocent. By the way, there were actually 3 trials because Pilate tried to get out of sentencing Jesus by sending him to Herod. Herod sent him back because Jesus didn't do any magic tricks for him. So then he ordered him to be put to death. Crucifixion was horrible. It was the most painful way for people to die. How long did it take?
Usually could take days.
Yeah, 4 or 5 days was standard. And you were hung on a cross naked just outside the city gates so that everyone would see you. That was done so that they would learn not to disobey Rome. 3 nails, and it's not in the palm, even though that's how most of the pictures show it. It's in the wrist between the 2 bones. Because if it's here, you know what? You're going to get off real easy. If it's here, doesn't matter how hard you try, you're not getting off. And it's through the 2 heel bones, 1 foot on top of the other. Technically, you mainly die from asphyxiation. As to breathe, you have to kind of pull yourself up. So you're pulling on those nails, and you're pushing on the nails through your foot to get your breath, because you're slumped over is your natural position. And eventually you get so weak you can't take a breath anymore, and you'll die of asphyxiation. It's horrible. And of course, Jesus was whipped 39 times even before, which 40 lashes is considered the death sentence because mainly people bled to death. 39 lashes, you pretty well bleed to death. And you can understand why Jesus collapsed while carrying his cross up to Golgotha, because he had already lost so much blood. Loses more when they pound the nails in him. He died in the same day. He was nailed to the cross, understandably. But weird things happen when he's dying. At noon, he's put to death on the cross at 9 a.m. At noon, the world goes dark. I mean, totally dark. It's not just that clouds went in front of the sun stopped shining. Pitch black. Then when he dies, a massive earthquake takes place. And at that moment, the sun shines again. And at that moment, the graves of many people were broke open, people who had died believing in him, and they came out alive. Didn't go into Jerusalem until after he was resurrected. And at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2. God gave a pretty powerful sermon right then. Pay attention. This is my son dying for you. And even the Roman centurion who was responsible for making sure Jesus died, he got it. He says, surely this man was the Son of God. And of course, I got to stop. But by the way, he rose again from the dead. He came back. All right, so you got an assignment. Bring this handout back if you remember. If you don't, that's fine. But look at those Bible verses, because we'll talk just a little bit about the resurrection next time. But I have to let the choir get in here, or there's going to be a hanging, a lynching. Yes. All right. God, thank you for our Bible study. Amen. Now get out of here. Wow, I am rude. Yeah. Woo.
Is there no Sunday school?
Oh, yeah, next week. We have Sunday school. Do you want, I'm planning on still teaching the class if some of you can come. If you can't come, then we'll just wait and do it. But the next 2 Sundays, Sunday school would start at 9 because the worship services are at 10. If you can come, come. If you can't, it'll be posted. But if you can't come, I'm not expecting all of you to be here. If no one shows up, whoever's here, like if it's just me and you, Jamie, we're going to do Christmas Bible study. But we'll still tape it. We'll have fun.